The hunt that changed everything. The veteran hunter sat in the dimly lit chamber, his massive frame casting long, jagged shadows against the polished obsidian walls. His exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lighting, the ridges along his carapace speaking of years of battle. Across from him, a young journalist, barely out of his pupil stage, quivered in anticipation. His recording appendages twitched with eagerness as his compound eyes reflected a mixture of fear and awe. "You want to know why we stopped hunting humans?" The old warrior's mandibles clicked together, his voice layered with something between bitterness and reluctant admiration. "It is not a tale of our species' strength. It is not one of glorious battle or honorable conquest." He leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes darkening. "It is a tale of humiliation, confusion, and the terrifying reality that the galaxy's so-called apex predators are not as untouchable as they believed." The journalist's breathing quickened as he activated his recording device. "The people deserve to know. Since the peace accords, the entire galactic community has been fascinated by humanity's resilience, their ingenuity, their unorthodox methods of survival." The warrior chittered in what might have been laughter, if laughter could sound like the grinding of steel plates. Resilience? A rather diplomatic word. We had another name for it before we understood the truth. Madness. Sheer, unrelenting madness. He paused, as if deciding whether to continue. But then he nodded. The story had to be told. "It began 30 Earth years ago," he said, his voice distant, lost in memory. "It was supposed to be a routine operation, a hunting expedition. Humans were new to the galactic stage, an anomaly from a death world, a world so dangerous that by all logic, no intelligent life should have emerged from it. Yet they had. And we, in our arrogance, saw them as nothing more than prey. Amusing prey, perhaps, but prey nonetheless." The journalist remained silent, his recording appendages frozen in anticipation. "Our target was a small research outpost on an unremarkable world designated HFY 2971. The warrior continued. "Only 12 humans. Minimal defenses. No immediate backup within several light years. A perfect opportunity to demonstrate hunting techniques to our younglings. A controlled environment. A guaranteed victory." His mandibles clicked in frustration. That assumption was our first mistake. The first phase of the hunt had gone as planned. Their forces had slipped through the void undetected, their ships coated in light-warping technology that rendered them invisible to human sensors. They had disabled the humans' communications array, cutting them off from any possible reinforcements. Standard protocol. Isolate the prey, induce fear, then strike. But there was no fear, the warrior muttered, his eyes narrowing. No panic. Instead, we intercepted something unexpected. Something disturbing. The journalist's voice was barely above a whisper. What was it? Laughter. The silence that followed was deafening. The journalist tilted his head in confusion. Laughter. Yes, the veteran growled. Laughter. Not the nervous, panicked laughter of creatures who know they are doomed. No, this was amusement. Mockery. The memory burned fresh in his mind. The intercepted radio transmission had been clear, the human voices filled with mirth. "Hey, Dr. Chen, looks like the space bug season opened early this year. Fantastic. I'll grab the rolled-up newspapers." The warriors had paused in confusion. Was this a form of primitive psychological defense, some bizarre human attempt to mask their terror? It was unsettling, the warrior admitted. But we proceeded with the hunt. That night, we sent our youngest juvenile to disable their perimeter defenses. A simple task, in and out, silent and efficient. He clenched his claws together, his voice bitter. He returned covered in something the humans called honey and feathers, an absurd combination with no logical tactical advantage. The journalist's eyes widened. Were they trying to humiliate him? Trying. The warrior's mandibles twitched. No, young one. They succeeded. Their juvenile had stumbled back into camp, barely able to speak, his exoskeleton sticky with the strange, golden substance and soft organic filaments clinging to his limbs. And the humans? They had filmed it. They had filmed the entire incident and were broadcasting it among themselves. They were watching us, the veteran growled. Mocking us. They had cameras positioned to capture every moment, and they were treating our hunt as entertainment. The warrior's claws scraped against the table. That should have been a warning, a sign to withdraw. But we were proud. Too proud. We assumed this was an anomaly, that their luck would run out. And so we attacked directly. He leaned in, his voice lower now. They were waiting for us. The journalist's breath hitched. How? The warrior's mandibles twitched in a motion that could have been a grimace. They had prepared. When the warriors launched their frontal assault, expecting fear and chaos, they had been met with something else entirely. From the facility's external speakers, a strange, high-energy melody blared through the night, a tune later identified as Entry of the Gladiators, a human circus march. As the warriors charged, a lone human stood atop the structure, playing an additional accompaniment on a crude wind instrument they called a kazoo. They turned our attack into a joke. The warrior hissed, his pride stinging even after all these years. We, the greatest hunters in the galaxy, reduced to a spectacle. The journalist was transfixed, unable to look away. What did you do? We pressed on, the warrior said, his voice dark. We thought that was the end of their antics. We were wrong. That was merely the beginning. The humans, it seemed, had studied their enemy. They had discovered the warrior's sensitivity to high-frequency sounds and had spent the previous night programming their research drones to emit a relentless, synchronized loop of something called Baby Shark, a sound so grating, so unbearable, that the warriors had danced against their will, their nervous systems spasming under the assault of the nonsensical melody. The journalist's recording appendages twitched violently. They weaponized a children's song. Yes, the warrior muttered, and it only got worse from there. His mandibles clicked once more, his compound eyes darkening with the weight of memory. Young one, that was the moment we understood. This was no ordinary prey. No, humans were something else entirely. Something unpredictable. Something terrifying. He straightened, his carapace gleaming under the dim lights. We did not fear them because of their weapons, their technology, or their numbers. His voice lowered to a near whisper. We feared them because they did not fear us. The journalist's appendages were shaking now. He swallowed. And what happened next? The warrior let out a slow, measured breath. You truly wish to know? The journalist nodded, his fate sealed. Then let me tell you the rest of the story. The hunt becomes a spectacle. The chamber remained deathly silent as the old warrior leaned back, his massive form settling into the reinforced seat with a weighty creak. The journalist, still reeling from the absurdity of the first encounter, stared, his recording appendages trembling slightly. They turned your elite warriors into a laughingstock, the young one murmured. But surely, after that, you regrouped. You struck back harder. The old warrior's mandibles clicked in what might have been the alien equivalent of a smirk. Ah, you are still thinking like a logical strategist. That was our mistake, too. He let out a chittering sigh. We assumed that the humans had exhausted their tricks, that their antics were simply the desperate flailings of an outmatched species. The old hunter's clawed fingers tapped against the table. We were wrong. So very, very wrong. He took a long pause before continuing, his voice layered with something that was not quite grief, nor quite humor, but a strange mixture of both. After the musical assault, we withdrew to regroup, allowing our systems to recalibrate. But we were in rage, humiliated. No species had ever dared mock us before. His eyes darkened. We would show them what it meant to truly be prey. The journalist nodded, transfixed. That night, we launched a full-scale attack. The old warrior said, his tone dropping into something more somber. Not the half measures of before. No more scouts. No more juveniles. We brought in veterans. Hunters who had felled creatures on high-gravity worlds, who had torn apex predators apart with their bare claws. This time, we would not toy with them. We would erase them. He paused, mandibles twitching. And yet, when we descended upon the facility, we found a party. The journalist's appendages stiffened. A party. Yes, the warrior hissed, still seeming offended by the memory. A human gathering, with colored lights, strange, pulsing music, and long tables lined with what we later identified as snacks. They had transformed their outpost into a festival. His claws clenched. It was as if they were celebrating our arrival. The journalist's breathing was shallow. That doesn't make sense. Nothing ever makes sense with humans, the warrior muttered. But at the time, we were furious. We believed this was yet another act of mockery, a final insult. So we stormed their defenses, expecting an ambush. Instead, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Instead, a human approached us. He was holding a large rectangular object, a tray filled with small, round, golden food items. The journalist was struggling to keep up. Food. The warrior nodded slowly. He called them donuts, and he offered them to us as a gift. The silence in the room was thick. The war-hardened hunters of the most feared predatory species in the galaxy, the warrior said, his voice dripping with disbelief. And this Deathworlder offered us pastries. The journalist blinked rapidly. What did you do? The old warrior let out a long, resigned sigh. We hesitated, just for a moment. And that hesitation, it cost us everything. The assault had been perfectly timed. They had moved in with precision, their stealth technology ensuring that they could strike before the humans even realized what was happening. But then the humans realized. And the moment they did, they began making bets. Their laughter rang through the outpost's speakers. I give it 5 minutes before they step into the net trap. No way, they'll slip on the buttered ramp first. 10 credits. Double or nothing on the hidden air horns. The warriors had frozen in confusion. Were they gambling on the outcome of the battle? Then, the chaos erupted. They tried to advance, but the ground beneath them was covered in an insidious liquid trap, something called cooking oil. The warrior took a deep breath, his mandibles tightening. It was everywhere, impossible to navigate. You see, our species relies on traction. Our claws dig into solid ground. But this substance, he let out a low growl. It made us slide. The journalist choked on a suppressed sound. Yes, the warrior said flatly. It was humiliating. His voice lowered, filled with deep shame. Some of us, fell. Our greatest warriors, flailing like newborn larvae, crashing into one another, limbs tangled. And all the while, the humans were. He clenched his fists, cheering. The journalist felt lightheaded. They turned the battle into a game. A spectacle, the old warrior corrected. They had recording devices positioned everywhere. Every moment of our failure was broadcast. And the worst part, they had commentary. The journalist's appendages twitched violently. Commentary. The warrior sighed, rubbing his temples, a human voice narrating the entire event like a sporting competition. His voice turned into a mocking imitation of the human broadcast. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Our contestant from Team Bug is struggling on the butter trap. Oh, and he's day one. Look at that slow motion replay. The journalist was gripping his seat. Surely you still fought back. We tried, the warrior said darkly. But then they released the balloons. Silence. The journalist's voice cracked. The what? They were everywhere, the warrior groaned, floating filled with some kind of gas that made them hover. We had never encountered such a thing before. And he rubbed his face, clearly struggling to process the memory. They were filled with confetti. The journalist made a strangled noise. Every time we struck one down, it would explode, showering us in bright, multicolored things, sticking to our carapaces, clinging to our weapons, making us look. His voice dropped to a whisper, festive. The journalist was barely holding himself together. I don't. How? The warrior sighed. Our forces were breaking. We lost all cohesion. And then, he took a long, slow breath. They activated the bubble machines. A long pause. The journalist's voice was hollow. I need you to repeat that. Bubbles, the warrior growled. Hundreds of them. Floating, harmless. But everywhere. Every time we moved, they popped. And every time one of them popped, his mandibles clicked shut. The humans cheered. Silence stretched between them. We had lost all dignity, the warrior admitted. We were the terror of the galaxy, and in a single night, we became clowns. The journalist could barely breathe. So, what happened next? The warrior looked away. We ran, he muttered. We ran. And do you know what those monsters did? The journalist shook his head. The warrior's mandibles twitched. They threw us a parade. The journalist's recording appendages froze. And that, the warrior said, rising to his full, intimidating height, was only the beginning. The breaking point, when hunters became the hunted. The chamber remained silent except for the faint hum of the recording device, its tiny blue light flickering in time with the journalist's ragged breaths. His appendages trembled, overwhelmed by what he had just heard. A parade. The full-fledged celebration of their humiliation. The galaxy's most fearsome hunters paraded through the outpost as entertainment. His mandibles clicked nervously. Surely, surely. After that, you retaliated. The old warrior let out a sound somewhere between a sigh and a growl. We tried. He stared into the distance, lost in the horrors of memory. We did not retreat back to our homeworld, not immediately. That would have been an admission of failure. No, we called for reinforcements, a full battalion, 25 of our finest warriors, trained in psychological resistance. They were veterans, elite hunters from the most unforgiving worlds, immune to the weaknesses that had broken our first wave. He flexed his clawed hands, or so we thought. The journalist leaned forward, unable to look away. And what happened? The old warrior's mandibles twitched. They were expecting us. The reinforcements had arrived in full force, their ships slipping past the planet's atmosphere like silent wraiths. The battered survivors of the first wave had stood at attention as the new forces disembarked, their gleaming armor unmarred by human tricks. The commander of the reinforcements, a warrior by the name of Rocktal, had surveyed the situation with cold precision. He had no patience for failures, and even less for the absurdity of human games. How? Rocktal had demanded. How did 12 unarmed researchers break an entire hunting party? The surviving warriors had shuffled in place, their mandibles clicking in discomfort. It was not battle, Commander, one had finally admitted. It was something else. Elaborate. The warrior hesitated. They turned our hunt into a performance. They cheered. Rocktal had stared at him. Cheered. Yes. They encouraged our failures, laughed at them, celebrated them. It broke us. The commander had scoffed. You let soft-skinned scientists break your spirits. You shame our ancestors. His mandibles had twitched with irritation as he surveyed the outpost from a distance. It looked peaceful, tranquil even. There was no indication that this small human settlement had somehow repelled an entire hunting party through sheer absurdity. His voice was firm. We end this tonight. No more games. We show them what it means to be hunted. And so, they had prepared for war. But they had underestimated the humans. again. The attack had begun under the cover of darkness. A perfect assault. Stealth operations engaged. No sound. No warning. Then, as they moved closer, a voice echoed through the settlement speakers. A single, enthusiastic, human voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Galactic Hunters season final." The warriors froze. Roktal had spun around, his mandibles flaring. "What?" Another voice chimed in. "That's right, folks. After last week's record-breaking premiere, our contestants have returned for the rematch we've all been waiting for. Will they fare better this time, or will they become yet another highlight reel?" The warriors exchanged looks of alarm. "Commander," one hissed. "They are broadcasting us." Roktal's eyes narrowed. "Ignore it. Move forward." And here come the contestants, moving in perfect formation. Oh wait, do I see some hesitation in their ranks? Is that fear? Folks, we might be in for another spectacular night. The commander's patience snapped. Onward. They surged forward, determined to silence the infuriating voices. But then something changed. As they moved in, lights burst to life. Floodlights, spotlights, blinding beams that cut through the night, illuminating the warriors as if they were performers on a stage. A massive electronic scoreboard flickered on above the human compound. Hunters, 0. Humans, 1. Roktal blinked. What is this? And then the music started. A thunderous melody echoed through the outpost, pounding through their exoskeletons. Later, they would learn the song had a name, Eye of the Tiger. But in that moment, all they knew was that it was mocking them. The scoreboard flashed. Round 2, begin. And then, chaos. The first trap was instant. The warriors stepped forward, only for the ground to suddenly vanish beneath them. Pitfalls. Carefully covered trenches, disguised perfectly with materials that mimicked the ground. They plummeted, landing in soft foam blocks. From somewhere in the compound, cheers erupted. And Daewon Joey's DE first wave. I told you they'd fall for it, Jerry. Roktal's eyes burned with fury. Out. Now, the warriors scrambled up, their dignity already shattered. And that was when the confetti cannons went off. Explosions of color rained down upon them, coating their armor in vibrant, glittering fragments. The scoreboard dinged. Hunters, 0. Humans, 2. The next wave charge, determined to break through. They hit the buttered ramp. One by one, the warriors slid wildly out of control, crashing into each other, tumbling down in a heap of tangled limbs. The music shifted. Now it was circus music. The scoreboard flashed again. Hunters, 0. Humans, 3. Roktal's breathing was ragged. He refused to fall like the others. He pressed forward, right into the net trap. The entire battalion was scooped off their feet, dangling helplessly in the air. And then the fireworks began. Bright, colorful explosions lit up the sky, spelling out human words. Thanks for playing. The warriors flailed. Roktal screamed. The broadcast continued. Oh folks, this is just spectacular. And that, my dear viewers, is why humanity remains undefeated. And then the humans released balloons, each one painted with smiling faces. The warriors broke. Physically, mentally, spiritually. And that was the moment the Klaxthor High Command made a formal decision. No more hunting Deathworlders. Ever. The old warrior's mandibles twitched as he finished his tale. That was the last hunt. The final battle. And from that day forward, our species never attempted to hunt humans again. The journalists sat in stunned silence. They defeated you with fireworks and butter. The warrior sighed. They defeated us with something much worse. The journalist swallowed. What? The warrior's mandibles clicked shut. They defeated us with entertainment. The galactic fallout. when the universe laughed at the hunters. The chamber remained still, the weight of the story pressing down on the young journalist like the crushing gravity of a collapsed star. The old warrior, his exoskeleton gleaming under the dim light, sat in silence, lost in thought. The journalist swallowed, his recording appendages trembling as they hovered over his console. So that was it. You abandoned the hunt after that final defeat. The warrior's mandibles twitched. No, we should have. But pride is a terrible thing. He exhaled sharply, the sound a mixture of exhaustion and reluctant amusement. High Command refused to acknowledge the truth. They dismissed our reports as exaggerations, as failures of discipline rather than an existential crisis. They ordered a final mission, one that would restore our dignity. The journalist leaned in. A last hunt. The warrior nodded. Yes. The most elite of our species, warriors who had never known defeat, were gathered. They were given one objective: retake our honor. His claws tapped against the table, the sound sharp and deliberate. It was the greatest mistake our species ever made. The last hunt. The elite warriors, hand-selected from across the galaxy, arrived in solemn silence. They bore no markings of past victories. Those had been stripped after the previous humiliations. Their armor was sleek, reinforced against any unexpected human trickery. Their weapons were optimized, resistant to sound-based distractions. Their tactical systems had been upgraded to filter out all unnecessary human communications. They had trained. This time, they would not be deterred by nonsensical music. They would not be distracted by humor. They had studied every recorded encounter, analyzed human tactics, and crafted countermeasures for every bizarre trick the Deathworlders had employed. They had developed immunity to high-pitched frequencies. They had reinforced their footing to prevent slipping on unexpected substances. They had trained in psychological resistance, prepared to ignore mockery, insults, and humiliating gestures. They were in every way prepared. And it didn't matter. The humans were waiting for them, with popcorn. As the elite warriors landed, the first thing they saw was a viewing party. Humans had gathered on an elevated platform, reclining in seats, eating snacks. A massive holographic display had been set up, labeled Live Broadcast, The Rematch, and beneath it, in flashing letters, Can the hunters score a single point? The warriors hesitated. The humans were broadcasting the entire event. Again, the lead commander, a battle-scarred warrior known as Varkan, snarled, "Ignore them. Proceed." But the moment they took their first step, the scoreboard flickered to life. Hunters, 0. Humans, 1. The warriors stopped. Varkan's mandibles twitched. How? We haven't even started yet. A human's voice rang out over the speakers. You showed up again. That's a point for us. The warriors seethed. They advanced. The chaos unleashed. The first wave breached the perimeter. It was a flawless, synchronized movement, their newly reinforced boots digging into the soil, preventing any surprise terrain mishaps. They were proud. Then, the feather drones activated. Hundreds of small, buzzing machines burst from the facility, circling the warriors and releasing clouds of microscopic feathers. The hunters froze. The unthinkable happened. Their advanced, reinforced armor was not resistant to tickling. Their exoskeletons had tiny, sensitive gaps, evolved for flexibility. And the humans had found them. Within moments, elite warriors, hardened veterans who had survived planetary wars, were writhing on the ground, shaking as involuntary spasms overtook them. The humans erupted into applause. And that's another point for the humans, folks. This is looking like a repeat of last season. Hunters, 0. Humans, 2. Varkan roared, forcing himself forward despite the tickling horror. Counterattack. Now, the warriors unleashed their weapons. They had learned their lesson. No more subtlety. No more trying to scare the humans. They would incapacitate them outright. Energy projectiles rained down on the facility. Explosions ripped through the ground. And yet, nothing hit. The humans had left decoys. Dozens of inflatable human-shaped figures popped out of the ground, absorbing every blast. Some had comically exaggerated expressions. Others had tiny speakers embedded, set to play Wilhelm screams whenever they were hit. One particularly cursed decoy was programmed to say, "You missed me," in a childlike voice. The warriors froze in horror. The humans had turned their own battle into a carnival game. The scoreboard flashed again. Hunters, 0. Humans, 3. Varkan's patience snapped. "We will not be made fools of. Charge them directly." The warriors surged forward. And that was when the gravity panels activated. The humans had rigged the battlefield itself. Sections of the ground suddenly lost gravity, while others tripled it. Warriors launched helplessly into the sky, while others collapsed under their own weight. Some floated uselessly, flailing their limbs in frustration. One unlucky warrior drifted past the human platform, where a researcher handed him a drink. Thirsty. The warrior screamed in frustration. The scoreboard dinged again. Hunters, 0. Humans, 4. The final blow. Varkan, one of the last standing, had had enough. Ignoring everything, the mockery, the cameras, the scoreboard, he charged the lead human. A scientist, unarmored, completely vulnerable. Victory was finally within reach. Then, the human reached into his pocket and threw something, a tiny, insignificant piece of metal. It landed at Varkan's feet. His gaze flicked down. The object had 2 words inscribed on it. "You tried." Silence. Then the humans exploded into cheers. Fireworks erupted in the sky. Confetti rained down. The scoreboard flashed one final message. Hunters, 0. Humans, 5. Jamie Ovier. The journalist was speechless. The old warrior leaned back, rubbing his temples. That was the last hunt. The final humiliation. When the high command saw the footage, he exhaled. They banned all hunting operations against humans, permanently. The journalist's voice was hoarse. And now, the warrior groaned. Now we have human-themed tourism. Our younglings study their entertainment strategies. Some of our own people host commentary on their ridiculous competitions. His mandibles clicked shut. And the worst part, the journalist swallowed. What? The old warrior sighed. They send us invitations to participate in their sports leagues. The journalist was horrified. What did High Command say? The warrior's eyes darkened. They said, yes. The journalist fainted.